Hello everyone and welcome back to another Moxtober Daily Recap. For those of you who don't know what this is, Moxtober is an annual event where where for each day of the month of October, there's a different one-word prompt, and based on that prompt, people make various creative endeavors related to the game of Magic the Gathering. Most people make custom cards, which is what we review in these recaps, but people also draw art, write articles, make deck lists, anything creative related to the game of Magic the Gathering. So, if you want to find the designer credits for all the designs we talk about today, as well as the full files that we pulled this small sample from, and instructions on how you can get your own cards into those files to potentially be featured on future episodes, all of that is in the description. And with that, today's word is parasite. So my first card of the day is going to be from mtg.design, and it's going to be Syphon Wisdom. So let's go over there. So it's 2 black for enchantment with if you would draw a card, you may instead exile the top card of a target opponent's library face down. You may look at it and play that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were a mana of any color to cast it. I feel like this is an effect that has been on like some canon cards, but like with additional like text on them, or like it's been like a one-time exile or stuff, but it's just such a simple effect that I'm really surprised, or like I'm assuming I don't think it's been done in canon before, which is really like surprising to me. It feels like a really simple way to just kind of make it so that you can both get card advantage while also like quote unquote milling out your opponent, and sometimes it allows you in some ways to play like win-conless control. Your win-con is Syphon Wisdom and just yoinking all of their cards. And I think that not inherently being able to see the top card of your opponent's library until you draw it makes this interesting, because it makes it so that if you want to do lantern control-y stuff with this, you need like an actual lantern to like actually work with this. But yeah, I think that like obviously like the lantern control part of it pretty terrifying, but I think in general it seems like a simple, powerful effect that I'm surprised we haven't seen in canon. So yeah, shout out to CyberFive for this design.
I think the thing that's most interesting to me about this is that it's slightly card disadvantageous, but it effectively reads like, okay, I'm done playing my deck for now. We're both going to play your deck, and it's going to be kind of a mirror match, except I don't have a maximum hand size and you do. So I could see something where you're just like playing a black aggro deck, and then you slap this down against your like blue-white control opponent, and all of a sudden you know that like when you reach turn infinity, you're going to have more counter spells than they do because you've gotten to be the control deck for the past like 20 turns or whatever. So whatever counter war you guys have over like whatever the win con is that control is playing, assuming that they are playing a win con, you're going to have an edge on because A, you will never be constrained on colored mana, and B, your hand is full of like 10 action spells instead of like the 7 that they end up with.
Yeah, this also made me think of another point where it's like if you're playing against like rack or something that has like repeated discard effects, this is a way to just be like, yeah, actually, I'm not drawing cards anymore. Just gonna the I'm just gonna exile cards, and so you can have fun trying to discard my hand over there. I don't have any, and then you
Yeah,
just so yeah, that's also a neat part of this design.
I feel like you mentioned like it was surprising that this hasn't shown up before as a thing. I think that part of it might have to do with just how like truly god awful the exile look at spend mana of any color line of rules text is. It's a canon and relatively frequently reused chunk of rules text, but like you're basically committing to like a 6 to 8 line Magic the Gathering card just by merit of having that text.
Yeah, like in the grand scheme of things, it's like fairly recent, right? Like I think is around Kaladesh time when they started using it. Maybe I might just be going like Gonti is the first example that like sticks out in mind. But I think that's when they started like using this card a lot, this type of effect a lot, right?
Gonti is the first example that I think that they were happy with. There's one from Theros, it's like Daxos or something like that, was the first example. But yeah, this is a relatively young mechanic, and the fact that it only shows up as at rare, I think, is a combination of the templating being a pain and like they're doing a little bit of iterating with it before they get to whatever the more finalized sort of thing is. I don't think we've ever seen this text at uncommon, for example, just because it's so like unwieldy.
Yeah, like it's one of those things where like it's such a straightforward effect, but yeah, like I don't know how I would keyword this. So like it's not something I blame them for because like what in the goddamn hell do you keyword this as to like reflect the flavor across all cases? Like
So
I
I
could honestly see like pick their brain as like a funny way of doing it, just like the to pick an opponent's brain, exile the top card of that opponent's library face down, and then the whole line text. So.
This is something where me and Bradley Rose have actually talked about this a little bit before. And Gavin had a thing where he was talking about like what things should be keyworded in Magic that aren't. And this came up, and he suggested, I want to say, like steal a card and mana wash it. Um,
Okay, I'm gonna
but
be
like
real.
then
That
you
sounds
have to define
that
those.
that sounds kind of whack. Specifically because like it does not evoke like mana fixing to me, but it evokes like, oh man, I can't wait to take my car out to the car wash. I don't know if that's just me. I don't know. Like,
No,
so,
that's hilarious. Yeah.
like something about it, just like I'm just like, huh, humst, humstative. Um,
This is kind of silly, but I'm kind of mad at Discord right now because it definitely didn't record the fact that when you said the car wash bit initially, I just burst out laughing. It's just like, oh no, we don't need to transmit that.
No, I hate when it does that because it's just like, yeah, that is not speaking frequency, therefore I will not transmit it.
Ugh. Either way,
Or,
though,
or
this is
maybe
a
or
really
maybe
good
there's
card
just like
concept.
maybe there's just a laugh parasite existing in Discord sound, really
It
on
just
theme to
eats
the.
all the laughter. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's distressing.
Mm-hmm. Um. Okay, so yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say about this card, but I do agree. I think that we're coming up on the time when someone is going to keyword someone or Watts. I don't think anyone's going to keyword it until Watsy does actually. Watsy is when it's gonna Watsy's going to keyword it in some way, and it's going to become a staple going forward. But yeah, okay. So what is your first card going to be?
My first card is in the MSE file, and it's listed as designed by Cajun. The card is Persistent Tapeworm. It's one and a black for a 1/1, with Parasite two and a black. Um, what Parasite means is for two and a black, you merge this card from your graveyard under target permanent. It gains the Parasite's abilities. Exile the Parasite if it would leave. Activate only as a sorcery. Um, and then it has when this creature dies, create an XX worm creature token, where X is one plus its power. Um, so there's several things that I like about this in general. I was genuinely, I don't know, not a huge fan of mutate as far as things go. I tend to not like those bestowed style mechanics because they tend to be a little bit card disadvantageous or a little bit clunky on the whole. Where by contrast, I tend to like this just because it's like it's a graveyard mechanic that grants an ability. You have a way to play this in its fair mode, but when you do play it in its fair mode, you really want to throw it in the garbage. Um, and it's just like a lot of things going on, but that cumulatively feel like what it would be like to be infested like a parasite, and also feel like good, useful effects to tie together in terms of making a card that has a bunch of different functions.
Yeah, like it's again anything that's like essentially like flashback, quote unquote, in the sense of like gives you two for ones out of your grave is super cool. Um, I think that one thing is that it says merge this from your graveyard under target permanent, but the ability says when this creature dies. So maybe just say when this dies to make it so that you can like, if you want to be able to, or maybe it should just say merge this from your graveyard under target creature. Um, it depends on the intent. Do you want the tapeworm to be able to infest your enchantment? Or is that not a play pattern that you're looking for? But yeah, it just seems really. It reminds me of like Scavenge, but like with actual flexibility, I suppose.
Yeah, and like one of the things that was difficult about Scavenge is that like a lot of the rate was tied up in the front body, and also a lot of rate was tied up in the fact that it was going to have a consistent effect between the front and the back. So like your 2/2 Scavenge is always going to make 2+1+1 counters. You can't make that not the case. Where by contrast, for this, you end up with having the nice thing of actually, the rate on this is really juiced because it's like a 1/1 that dies makes a 2/2 and has the parasite. So like on its own, you can parasite into the 2/2, and when the 2/2 dies, make a 3/3. And if you parasite into anything else, it's like really strong. So like this thing already has pretty juiced rate on the whole. It might be that it needs to be slightly more expensive, but like the front side of this being like a relatively terrible body makes for a very manageable sort of power on the front side. In the sense of like gameplay power, not hitting hard. Um, yeah.
Okay, so my next card is going to be uh, from the MSC file. It's going to be Rage Parasite, um, designed by MBTree. So I saw this posted in like one of the custom card channels earlier, and I was like going gaga. I know there were some people who didn't like it, and I'm gonna lay out like the arguments for this. Um, but the first reason this caught my eye is because I like it as a red card on a day when we are seeing a lot of like blue, black, green cards. Um, Mainly because I also like there've been like so many cool virus or like parasites in red, specifically from Innistrad, where you have that like that threaten parasite, which is which is kind of like for me the iconic red parasite. This doesn't do a similar effect, but I like the idea of like insect horror in red as being like this flavor benchmark. But when I come to the effect, haste. Whenever another creature with haste enters the battlefield under your control, it gains first strike until end of turn. And I love this because I think it's a very powerful aggressive card on its own, but it also makes haste relevant beyond the turn that it comes in, which is something that people had a mixed opinion on. Some people were like, hey, this keyword is usually something I only have to consider the turn it comes in, and having to have that comprehension complexity of, oh, now all of a sudden I have to be aware or like keep track of haste beyond that turn is a problem. I think the other thing is, I think that making it matter beyond the turn it comes in makes it feel like it's worth a line of text slash um, keep makes the design space or use of haste more salient slash relevant. Um, One thing that I saw was in a Cajun, whose card we just featured actually, made a set called Monsters of Chikyu. One of the archetypes was green red flash first strike haste kind of tribal together, with the idea being that, or it might have just been flash and it was like flash and haste tribal, where the idea was like these play into a sort of like tempo-y plan which can play defensively until it just gets really aggressive and then goes off. And so, and getting the benefit both on flash and haste kind of gives the payoffs on flash and haste makes you not just like run out. It makes you like think about how you curve out and not just like, oh, I play my haster into another haster into another haster and just win. So I think that like that's another consideration for this card. But yeah, overall I'm a big fan of the general concept, and as we all know, I am a fan of commons. So yeah.
So I think this thing actually doesn't, as is, I don't think it like changes the window of when you need to care about haste because it's caring about like other creatures with haste coming in. So it cares about those haste creatures for a turn because it gets first strike off of them. But it's like the critical window for caring about the haste cards is the same. It's just like it cares about haste cards other than itself. So I guess there's an argument to be made that it makes you not just have to care about a haste card for its on its own sake. But personally, as someone who like has a moderate dislike of cards that make haste matter like in a longer window, I still like this card fine. Like, and that's probably like a testament to the functionality of it and the quality just in general. That like even me, a person who's like kind of categorically against the sort of designs that like often get criticized when it comes to haste design, I still like this card. I like the idea of just like, oh, I'm gonna have an aggressive guy, and then if another aggressive guy comes in, then I'm going to, like shave off a little bit of that aggression and steal it for myself. So I'm gonna hit first for that turn when something comes down that has haste.
yeah, like it just creates this interesting like mini game. And I think that like I like mini games which are focused on like in this case combat or like sequencing stuff that is like normally part of the game and doesn't like create this extra layer of stuff you have to consider over it. It's so yeah, it's just cool.
I guess one thing that you might end up having to care about that's kind of strange for people is the idea of sandbagging a haste creature in order to give this thing first strike until end of turn. So, like, if you're thinking, okay, there's going to come a turn where I'm able to make my opponent have to make some very awkward blocks because they're relatively low on life. And if this has first strike, then they have to make even more awkward blocks. So this turn, I'm going to develop with this like I'm gonna like not play this haste creature and swing in is a possible thing that you might do in order to the next turn be able to play that haste creature and I don't know some sort of anthem or overrun or something like that. That way you know the Rage Parasite's going to be first striking on the turn when you can do whatever the big thing is. I could see people maybe not liking having to think about that, but I feel like that's just like, classic like rewarding of I don't know, enters the battlefield effects or like just some pretty bog standard sequencing to me. I don't think that that's anything wrong to be rewarding that.
For sure. Okay. But yeah, that's all I have to say about this card. So shout out to MBTree for it. Um, so what is your next design going to be?
Let's see here.
Also, I like how like on episodes with me and Bradley, usually we're like zooming through the cards because we don't have much to talk about. While here, I think we've covered as many cards as we would have with three people, uh, in like a slower time frame. So like we really going into detail about this stuff. And that's not
I,
an
I
issue.
definitely
That is not an issue at all. I just find it hilarious how like there's different like communication or like communication styles between when I have different people in the show and we're talking about like different cards. Yeah.
I definitely like that there's a different sort of tone and timbre between folks. Okay, so in the um, Magic Set Editor file, second from the top among those two blank cards is one that's called Parasitic Paradise. But in the name field, there's nothing just because the
Yeah.
Magic
Okay.
Set Editor file
We
is
can't
weird.
actually show that one because it didn't export properly
Oh,
because it doesn't have a name, which
well,
which
shoot.
which wobbles. Sorry about this, but yeah, if your card doesn't have a card name in the file, which happens if you accidentally set your type line as the name, it just won't export the image because it's like I can't export this to a like I don't have like a file name to export this to. So like rest in peace to that.
Oh, that's so extremely cursed. I'm sorry to hear that. That's a really funny joke. If anyone's listening, check out the MSE file for a very, very amusing possibly silver bordered card. Anyway, let's go to my fallback here is going to be Insidious Miser in the mtg.design file then. All right, so Insidious Miser is black black for a 3/2. When it attacks, you may pay 1 life to smuggle the top card of your library. To smuggle a card, exile it. As long as it's exiled this way, its owner may play it by paying 2 as an additional cost. And as long as you've lost life this turn, you may ignore smuggle cost. So this is a Dark Confidant variant with a more aggressive body, but requires participating in combat, um, and also like kind of a constraint on where the cards are located. Um, I like Smuggle conceptually as far as things go. It's sort of like a clue, but it's a clue where you get to choose what you're getting out of it. And presumably there are other things that reward you for like getting out smuggled cards and things like that. Um, I just think that like anything that is like exiling and appending like useful text onto an exiled card or like has a sub game around drawing a card rather than just purely drawing a card is a great way to add a little bit of texture to how you do card draw or card advantage or any sort of other like messing about with cards.
Yeah, and like smuggle feels like a very intuitive keyword, right? It's like, oh man, I get this card, but I'm gonna have to pay a little bit more to like get it under customs. Um, and I like the like yeah, and I like that this is aggressively statted. Um, I think that paying one life on your aggressive thing to effectively draw a card, and when it fuels itself, I think it fuels itself a little bit too much. But the overall concept here seems really solid. Of like, there's this aggressive engine which causes you to lose life in order to draw cards for an extra cost, but then you can turn that into an upside. Um, yeah, I just wish the engine piece. I guess like I just wish the engine, not the engine. I just wish all the pieces didn't fit together this neatly. Because usually synergy is good, but I think it fits together a little too well here.
Do you kind of wish that, like, one of the things I like about the rate that it's at right now is it has the very Dark Confidant feel of you're super happy when this hits a land because you know you can immediately play it very confidently when it swings in and hits a land. Um, I kind of wish it was something like if you've lost like life greater than or equal to the mana value of a smuggled card, you may ignore its smuggle costs. Something like that.
Could you repeat that? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. As long as you've lost life greater than or equal to a card's mana value, you may ignore its smuggle cost. Something like that.
Oh. Oh. Hey, I like that a lot. I actually like that a lot. Yeah. That seems really solid. Um, specifically in that it doesn't enable itself fully, but if you're playing in an aggro deck, you know, they if you're playing a bunch of one drops or if you're playing like aristocrats with a bunch of stuff like that, you just go ham. Uh, but if you want to like if you're using this in mid range or something, it's gonna be a little more to actually get there.
Yeah, you might need like a second piece, and then that's like your life loss outlet or something like that. Or and it preserves that like Dark Confidant style. Oh, thank goodness I flipped a land sort of vibe.
Okay. Let's see. So my next card is going to be Fungify from the MSE file. Uh, do 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 do. So black and a green for an enchantment which turns a creature into a 1/1 green fungus with a one, and then it has remove 3 spore counters, create a 1/1 green sapling at the beginning of enchanted creatures owner's upkeep. Put a spore counter on it. Now there's a bunch of old like Talids and stuff which have this effect. Um, and God, I don't remember when it was, but there was a time in like I don't remember the exact commander, but in high school, me and my friends were all trying to make commander decks which were thematically coherent, but were the worst possible power level wise. Um, I eventually ended up on a Cloudhoof Kirin, mono blue Cloudhoof Kirin, Oops All Arcane Mill, which is a triumph. But there's another commander who I can't remember at the moment who like cares about spore counter creatures, and then through like researching that I like fell in love with all these dinky little Talids and stuff who just put out spore counters, make a bunch of saprolings. They're super slow, but like by golly, are they working hard? And then you like throw in a bunch of effects that are usually overrate, like proliferate and stuff, just to like get your spore counters online. And it's like it was just a huge fun time. And I love the idea of this being something um, where you remove an opponent's creature, but it turns into something that they can still potentially get value out of slash use well. Um, I guess my only thing is like for a black green removal spell, it's super weak. If it's a common, as this seems to be, I can probably excuse it for that. But also like I could definitely see this maybe having a little bit more oomph. Maybe if since you're doing the parasite part of it, maybe you get the spore counter ability on a creature you control. I don't know how that would work, but like I'm just like spinning my wheels. But overall, I love the concept of this. I think it's a very cute throwback reference. So shout out to Grace Fallen or Angel of Grace for this design.
I think that Thalids are probably like the first sort of Dice Factory archetype that existed. And I think they kind of have this iconic place in people's hearts for that. Um, I wonder how much you could get away with like mass removing stuff with some sort of Fungify thing. Like, what happens if you turn all your opponent's creatures into Thalids?
Huh. Like, what do you in what sense?
And like you know that one green white playtest card that's a board wipe that turns all the creatures into lands? What if there was like a, I don't know, a green black board wipe that turned everything into 1/1 Thalids with the Thalid ability?
Oh, that's actually ooh. I like that a lot because I could see that as like one black green. Uh, Destroy all creatures. Each player creates X Talid tokens with the Talid ability, where X is equal to the number of creatures they control that were destroyed this way. Where it's like you still get like a board that starts to like grow itself after over time, but man, you lose out on power in the short term. But yeah, I don't have like much more to say about this. So, uh, what is your next card going to be, Mark?
Let's see here. Where did it go? Really hate when I write down the name of a card and I'm not sure whether. Oh yeah, designed by FlamboyantBlobfish. The card is Cavesse Cerebral Parasite. It's a 2 loyalty planeswalker for 1 black. Um, with a +2 that is each player loses 2 life unless they exile a card from their hand face down, and a -2 that is each player looks at a random card they don't own exiled with this planeswalker. They may cast that card without paying its mana cost. And a -4 that is each player looks at a random card they owned exiled with this planeswalker. They may cast that card without paying its mana cost. I feel like the rate here, I'm not sure whether I think it's going to be dangerous or not, just because the idea of like show and telling something with a turn's delay is kind of scary. Um, but I like the like sub game of trying to get your opponent to discard a good thing, and then you downtick this, and you get to cast their good thing, and they get to cast your junk or whatnot. I also like the steeliness of it. I like that, similar to the one that you brought up first. Stealing is kind of like a motif of Parasite here that isn't just the explicit, like a thing that latches onto a person and like drinks their vital fluids or whatever.
Okay, first thing I have to say, real bold of you to pronounce it Cavesse instead of Cavesse. You really went for the hard E there. Like, I feel like if I was seeing this in a normal fantasy setting, I would just be like, yeah, Cavesse. But then like, it just feels so much more powerful to call, like, it's like, Cavesse just sounds like, yeah, that's a very, like, I can imagine that as the name for evil dude. But then Cavesse, it's like, oh, there's some intrigue. What's going on here? Like, I don't know how to describe it, but just like, the, you pronouncing it Cavesse had me cracking up. Um, and then, as for the actual card itself, um, I I like the general like idea. I think that the number should be adjusted so that you can't +2 um, into immediately -4ing it, because that just feels a little too free unless this is intended for cube. Um, but otherwise, I like the general play pattern of this, where it's like it's essentially it's either a discard a card each turn, or it's doing a good what's the 3 mana enchantment that hits you for 2 damage each upkeep and also prevents players from gaining life.
Oh, sulfuric vortex.
Yeah, this it does a good sulfuric vortex impression, um, while then also like having like mild combo potential. So yeah. Okay. So my next card is going to be from the MSC file, and it's going to be Energy Vampire by Wobbles, or not Wobbles, iemcd. I'm so sorry. Um, but yeah, so This is design based on I I at least know it from the Hulu show What We Do in the Shadows, Energy Vampire, where in that show there's a guy, Colin Robinson, who's a non-traditional vampire who essentially eat like sucks out people's like essentially motivation by like talking to them about the boringest shit possible. Um, it is very funny, and I think in context here, it's a lot of fun um, to like see energy vampire just be like, yeah, it's very powerful, but you're gonna need to keep feeding it. And I like the play pattern of like, yeah, you can play this on turn two, whack them for three, but and but if you don't keep feeding it energy, it's just gonna keep getting tapped down. And you can't do anything with it. Giving you one free swing with it makes it feel less like a dam. I have to already have so much invested into this. But yeah, I think that it's just a silly, flavorful, and fun design. I love the
There,
general like look of disgusted boredom in the art here.
I enjoy that this is using a parasitic mechanic and that it's about energy and I don't know. I that scratches a sort of Melvin itch for me personally.
Oh yeah, that's another like there are definitely I think there are like a few designs in here that are specifically about parasitic mechanics. But yeah, I didn't notice that about this card specifically, and now I'm like, yeah, cool. It's mechanics' flavor. Let's go, y'all. We did it. Okay, but yeah, if there's not much else to say about this one, what is your next card going to be?
Speaking of parasitic mechanics, my next card is in the Magic Set editor file, and it's called Parasitic Mechanic. This card should really be silver bordered, but it's two and a black for a snow creature, germ artificer spirit. And it says whenever you cast or splice a spirit or arcane spell, you get 2 energy. And you can pay 2 energy to have parasitic mechanic gain your choice of horsemanship or poisonous 2 until end of turn.
God, and I also love the art that Nim did for this. Um, absolutely. I honestly want this to have like horror or abomination as a type line as well because it really is. It really is.
I do like that it's an artificer though, so it's a mechanic.
Oh my god, I didn't get that either. No.
Also, artificers like hardly ever show up anywhere outside of Kaladesh, so there's like that one has 2 little bits stapled onto it.
Oh yeah, germ is also not exactly a common type, so it's a oh yeah, this is beautiful. This is really, really and truly beautiful. Um, it's the exact like type of silly that I can appreciate. So yeah, shout out to Nim for this one. I and I think that like it's one of those things where like it does all of this in 5 lines. It doesn't like overstay its welcome by like trying to like go too ham on the joke and add in every parasitic mechanic ever. It just adds a bunch of stuff that's like really iconic and resonant, and I appreciate that.
Kind of funny that they're mechanics that are iconically parasitic though. That's great.
Yeah, that's the world we live in now, apparently. Okay. So yeah, my next card is also going to be from the MSC file. It's going to be Hex Repopulator, designed by Void. So it's 2 white and a black with exploit, and whenever it exploits a creature with a different name, I'm assuming this is supposed to be a creature that doesn't share a name with itself, create a token copy of Hex Repopulationist. Um, and I like this because it has this like secret mode of what's actually going on is because you can just keep you can upgrade your entire board uh, on when this ETBs into 3/2s is kind of like the secret mode here where it's like heyo, we're gonna exploit everyone and now everyone's clones of me. It's an interesting slash I feel like not very often used like twist or turn on um, like exploity stuff. like, and I love the idea of like just chain exploiting being like a flavor thing for like repopulation for like a parasite. Like, I honestly wish that the art was a little bit, or maybe not that I wish, but I think that like the art could definitely go a little more ham on like the alien. I think this could be like an alien face hugger type thing. That's what this really sells out. The like that's what the mechanics really sell for me. But yeah, I think it's just like a sick design that you read it once and you're like, I beg your pardon, and then you read it twice and you get it and you're like, oh my god.
I think that this might be the single most perfect aristocrats card ever made. It's like you melt down all of your random 1/1s that you have for aristocrats reasons into 3/2s, and if any of them have dice triggers that make more tokens, you melt down those tokens into 3/2s too. And if you have anything that cares about stuff dying, you're gonna have like 6 things die this turn. So it's like if you want a curve topper for something aristocratsy, this thing just cackles like a supervillain and gets you a jillion dice triggers and gets you a squad of 3/2s that are gonna hit face next turn.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome as Aristocrat's top end. Yeah, especially because like again, if you have like Doom Travelers type stuff, it's like cool. I get two 3/2s for the price of one. Yeah, like yeah, this is just it's so ridiculous but so awesome. And like it's very useful in that specific because like 3/2 is kind of like the perfect average stat line. And so it really does encourage you to just like curve into this with a bunch of like raise the alarm Doom Traveler, and then you put a Blood Artist in there, and then you're like, bam, okay, we're going to town now.
Yeah, I feel like 3/2 is the stat line. Like, if you want to have a creature that's got just enough body to be like scary to see hitting you in the face, 3/2 is where it's at in my head.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's a whole uh, article on why 3/2 is like the ideal limited stat line. If I remember, I'll link it in the description. And if I don't, if you're on a server with LackyBot, just do $ articles, and and that's one of the ones that'll come up. But yeah,
Did not know LackyBot stored articles. That's wild.
yeah, LackyBot does a lot of stuff. I honestly one day I might just do a video on like what LackyBot can do for you. It has like it does. I don't think it has like a. It's not like a search. It does. It's not like it searches the database of like all articles. It has like specific design articles written by people in the custom magic community just stored, so you can reference them easily. But yeah, and if people don't know what LackyBot is, it's a bot coded by Cajun that does a bunch of stuff for custom magic. The easiest of which is card calls. Some of the most difficult of which is submitting cards directly from Discord into a shared MSC file in a Dropbox folder, which is how we're able to collect and look at all of these cards on a daily basis without having to do all of the searching upkeep. So big shout out to Cajun for that one.
Yeah, that one's a real feat. Like I can't imagine all that goes into that as far as like Dropbox probably has to have an API that makes that function. And then you have to have like importing the image into MSE programmatically. It just sounds like it's like really complicated to me.
Okay. Uh, what is your next card going to be?
My next card is Burrowing Parasite from the MSE files. It's a single black for a 1/1 with Infest 1 and a black. So that's exile it from your hand, infesting target creature. When that creature dies, you may cast this card without paying its mana cost. Activate this only as a sorcery. Um, and then it has when the creature Burrowing Parasite is infesting dies, it deals damage to each opponent equal to its power. Um, I kind of wish that. No, actually, I think that does work. Okay, so I think Burrowing Parasite can infest either creatures you control or creatures an opponent controls, which is a really cool use case for it. So you can either like have an insurance policy on a guy of yours that you want to kill, or you can infest some guy of theirs with a bunch of stuff and then blow up that guy, and all these bad things are going to happen to your opponent. I like that Infest itself also has like different use cases. So you can have like an expensive guy that infests for cheaper. You could have infest triggered abilities. You can probably do some like infest as a buff sort of things, but that's getting a little bit more fiddly. Um, On Burrowing Parasite specifically, I do wish that the mode of just casting at regular style had more value to it. So I kind of wish that it was a 1/1 death touch for one, or some other sort of like real stat line on the body itself. So you weren't just infested in the other use case.
But yeah, that was gonna be my exact like worry about this card as well, where it's like I like the idea of infesting, but I want it to be like a genuine like modality to it, and not just always infest if possible because you'll get a free cast anyways, and the base body is awful. So yeah, I could definitely see like yeah, and also infest takes up like so many lines. I wonder if like doing a chop top, chop bottom five would help take away like the little orphan sorcery there. But yeah, in general, this is definitely it's a mechanic that I feel like it's probably hard to do like a lot of design space for simply because of the length of it, where it's like you need like 4 to 5 lines for the reminder text, and then at least 2 lines to say, "Hey, here's the trigger condition for when this infest thing goes off," and then the actual payoff. But yeah, I mean that's not a bad thing. Lots of mechanics like that, but it's definitely like one thing that like uh, is going to rate limit a lot of the stuff that you can do here. Or not rate limit, but text limit. You know what I mean.
Yeah, I feel like if you can just find a way to cheat the infest into 4 lines instead of five, then you can probably get away with it on some pretty like simpler common designs, and then just say like at uncommon and up, we're going to start chopping the reminder text when we have to. But it is definitely something where there's like some pressure set on this card by the complexity of its mechanic, even though it's totally intuitive. Because like when I think infest, I think something along the lines of this. You know, it's got a creature inside of it. When it kicks the bucket, that creature comes out to play.
Yep, exactly. Which, ooh, not flavor I want to think about, but we are going to have to for today.
Oh
Um,
yeah, you're gonna not like my card along that front then.
uh-oh. Um, but yeah, this design, I don't know if we mentioned it, but just in case, um, is designed by Cord22. So thanks for the design, Cord. Okay, next up is, oh, it's my design. Hey, yeah, this was yours. Haha. Uh, so I'm going to go to the mtg.design file and go for Ren and One. So I've been loving, like, I feel like Ren has been an amazing thing just for like number based designs. Um, for example, one of the other projects that's being run this month is Mold AQ, which I talked about before, and someone designed Ren and Mole as a card because like mole the number, and that shit had me rolling. Um, in a similar vein, I think that Ren and One today does an interesting job of exploring kind of again in a very cool way, like because its mechanics as flavor. The idea that maybe before Ren figured out like the extent of their partnership with their tree folk friend, um, was maybe not so great at like balancing that. So the idea is like Ren is like parasitically, I guess, controlling the tree folk, um, and like by sacrificing lands, like essentially burning out their tree folk companion for their own ends, um, before they presumably mellowed out, learned that hey maybe I should respect my partner, and then like got better at that. Mechanically, I think that this does both too little and not enough. Too little because I think that a Harrow, which then turns into a board wipe next turn, is a little much for a 3 mana walker, uh, and too little because the play pattern of Harrow each turn and then wipe occasionally is pretty like I think it takes away the most fun element of planeswalkers, and that's the choice of which ability to use slash attention there. And I think that you can fit in a short third ability here to actually put tension onto what this card is doing, and then probably just adjust the numbers around so you can't insta wipe the next turn. Would be my feeling.
Yeah, I feel like there's this like very Boolean thing to this guy where it's either you manage to keep it around with enough loyalty to be able to wipe the board, and your opponent is really extremely behind, Or you don't manage to do that, and you've just gotten a Harrow that has fogged you a little bit, which is like pretty okay, but not amazing. Um, and it doesn't feel like the subgame is super compelling so much as it is just like a check of whether your opponent has this thing going on. And if not, then if they're doing like any one of a number of game plans, they're just so behind that they're kind of out of the game.
Yeah. So like, and I vibe with the idea of like getting value out of sacking your own lands. I think a Harrow is cool, but I think I'd probably prefer like the wipe as like, let's say maybe a -6, Harrow as a -1, so you actually stay at loyalty parity. Um, and then an actual like a 0 that's like maybe like sacrifice a land. Uh, if you do, you can put 2+1/+1 counters on another land you control. It becomes like a tree folk or something. I don't know. Maybe that's also like generating like creatures that might be a little problematic. But generally, I guess the idea is just adjusting the numbers and adjusting the play pattern.
I was thinking like sacrifice a land to shock something or bolt something as like a -2, or like maybe give the slightly higher starting loyalty. So like a foil loyalty walker, it's got 0, sacrifice a land, search your library for 2 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped. It's got like a -3, sacrifice a land, deal 3 damage to any target, and then it has like a minus, I don't know, let's say 8, destroy all lands or something.
Yeah, I could totally see it. But overall, yeah, shout out to HomeSlice for this flavor concept that's led to a lot of like interesting knobs to tweak. Um, okay. Whoa, whoa, whoa. So next up, that was my card. So it's your card next. I don't know why I'm looking at my list. Go ahead.
I had that thing where I was like, wait, did I submit this one for the choose? I was like frozen for a moment, like because I couldn't recall one way or the other. Um, let's see here. On the subject of planeswalkers, let's go to Spark Parasite in the MSE file. Uh, it's a black and a green for an aura with Enchant Planeswalker. Enchanted Planeswalker's loyalty abilities cost an additional -2 to activate. And whenever you activate one of the Enchanted Planeswalker's loyalty abilities, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. Um, I just really enjoy this as like I'm going to be like basically melting down this Planeswalker. I'm making it way, way harder for them to gain loyalty. Odds are very good that they can only lose loyalty now, but I'm going to be getting insane value out of their abilities while I slowly whittle down my my friend that I brought along with me. It's kind of a dick thing to do to your planeswalker buddy, but um, enjoyably so in terms of how like this as a planeswalker buff is like quite strong.
Yeah, and like I love how what's going on here is this thing where it's main deckable like hate removal that also if you're like in a planeswalker deck is just a good synergy card. Well, good might be pushing it a little bit, but like it's a respectable. It's not like a very silver bullety card because it's also a build around. So like you can use it on your opponent's thing, and then their walker just dies out very quickly, or you put it on your own walker, which has like good, let's say just like good abilities that you want to copy anyways, um, but like aren't sure about, and then you just go ham with them. So yeah, I'm a fan of this. I think it has like I like that like modality between removal and using it on your own thing, and I think that -2 is right where it's like you can maybe get like 1 or 2 activations off of this, um, but realistically, it's going to uh, like unless the like it's going to generate you a lot of value, but like it depends on the walkers and the environment to really inform how strong it's going to be. So
Yeah, you can very easily end up like stranding a planeswalker that's at like 1 or 2 loyalty. Um, and like that only after this hits it has downtick abilities. So you could like, I don't know, this hits a Liliana of the Veil at 1 loyalty. Yeah, they can uptick Lily to make each player discard 2 cards, but you can easily make that so that's not super useful, and also they're losing their Lily for that ability. So like they're trading it off.
Also, notably, it's whenever you activate. So if your opponent get,
Oh,
yeah, so the on your opponent's thing, it's just a straight downside. On yours, you get the upside.
oh, I like that. I didn't. That's very subtle, and that's like you know those curses they did recently that are like conditional curses that like sometimes you will want to enchant yourself with because sometimes they're a buff, but then oftentimes there will be a player it's like worse off for. Like the curse that turns everything into 3/3s. So if you're playing a bunch of rinky dink things, you're like, oh sweet. But if your opponent's playing like giant things tribal, then you're just like, oh, sorry, buddy. Um,
Yeah, humility, but not really, essentially.
yeah. So I just like that this has these like obviously the use cases on this are explicitly built in as opposed to there where they're implicitly. And there's an argument to be made that that's less elegant, but quite frankly, I don't really care as much about elegance when you get like something that is as a game piece, just a cooler game piece, and this is a very cool game piece.
Hell yeah. I almost want this as like just one black or something, or black black, so you can run it in more decks. Um, okay, and I think with that, we're getting to the last round of cards. So think long and hard about what you're going to choose for this one. Uh, Meanwhile, let's see. Which one am I doing as my last one? Hmm. Hmm. I think I'm going to end on a mostly jokey note. It's going to be from the MSC file Illusory Fleas. Um, so designed by Astrid with a B. This is a fun design where the idea is it's essentially one of those tap removal spells um, with the secret side mode of enabling, like you can put it on stuff, like if your environment has stuff with whenever this becomes tapped abilities, you can kind of go ham with that, etc., etc. Um, I think that this would be, and also like this needs to say whenever enchant creature becomes tapped for the first time, untapped for the first time each turn. Um, but I think that the intention is that it's like Silverboard, and it's supposed to represent that cartoon thing of the dog just scratching, scratching, scratching until someone stops it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I it's one of those things where like I get the joke, but I also think that like it could be super cool mechanically to enable, like put on your own thing, and then it's like I would love if you put this, if you're encouraged to instead put this on your own thing, and you can just like it's like uh maybe like uh choose one or choose four. You may choose the same mode uh more than once, and it's just tap enchanted creature, untap enchanted creature. So you can just tap your opponent's creature and leave it stranded, but like if you want if your own creature has like whenever this becomes tapped triggers, you can like uh tap untap tap untap to get like more value there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like just a bunch of inspired stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that type. Like I was thinking inspired, or like whenever like some people do like in lieu of attack triggers, to have more synergy. Whenever this becomes tapped, do a thing. Usually in sets with like vehicles and stuff. And I could see this as being something adjacent to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Um I kind of don't mind if it's like downside for your creature outside of the tap ability rewarding things because I think it's cool to have something where you're like I want to make my creature worse off and it's worth it to me in order to be able to get as much out of this as possible. It might be the case that this needs to tap and untap like a buttload for that to happen, where it's like tap it, untap it, tap it, untap it, tap it, untap it, tap it. But I don't mind that either.
No, yeah, that's entirely possible. Um, then I think like three times might be kind of the sweet spot, but I don't know if that's right entirely. Um, but yeah, I think that's all I have to say about this card. And again, again, especially today, I think there's like lots of like we said, lots of like dark, edgy, creepy stuff going on, and I just like this is like a silly take on the prompt.
Yeah, anytime someone like sees the prompt and fulfills the like, not that there are requirements, but fulfills the quote unquote requirements of the prompt, and they're like, I'm just gonna do a fun one.
Yeah, I
I
like to think
enjoy
of it
that.
like as a brief rather than a requirement, I suppose. And
Yeah.
I like the word brief specifically because that's the word that they use on the Great British Baking Show. So that's my only reasoning for liking it here, but I think that it works.
Now I'm just imagining that you see a creature with too much toughness, and you're like, oh, that's a soggy bottom right there.
Okay, next. Okay, we're gonna need like next year like damp to be one of the words, and then like someone needs to submit a soggy bottom thing, or maybe like or maybe just have like even just have some baking related thing because God knows that we've had words or prompts that are like that silly, like feast and stuff like that. So for sure we should go ham with that. Um, but yeah, okay. Enough about illusory fleas. What is your last card of the day going to be? And you can also like totally show your own cards at this point if you want to.
I am going to shamelessly show my own card at this point. So my card was Sallow Hench, um, which is in the mtg.design file. It's 2 black black for a 4/2 with Infested. And what Infested reads is this creature secretly has one of 3 creatures on its back face. When it dies, return it to the battlefield transformed. And the creatures on the back face are a 1/1 Death Touch, a 2/1 Flyer, or a 3/2 Menace. For this one, I think they'd be variable from among cards if I were to fill this out as like a theme in a set. But the idea is that your opponent doesn't know which of those 3 this is going to die and come back as. So they have to like try and figure out what you're planning around and going for like kind of a morphy sort of space. I was thinking it might be important to have like the reminder text say what the creatures are, but I'm not certain. Um, and there's also like that little, oh gosh, what do you call it? The little transform indicator by the little caret in the transform frame in the dayside frame. So it'd probably be like a question mark there or something like that if I was doing this templating like as precisely as possible. But
Gotcha.
this is a thing that I've been like trying to pursue for a while. I think this is the right complexity for at common. Is just like French vanilla guys on the back and pretty much straight vanilla outside of infested on the front. Um, and
Wait, can you name the 3 creatures that are on the back face?
I believe one of them didn't make it into the download just because of I forgot to click the right button. But they are tainted vitae. Um, let's see here. What is it? Juvenile Vainling, and the third one is Kidney Moth. Vainling is the menace one, Tainted Vitae is the death toucher, and Kidney Moth is the flyer.
Yeah, rest
They're
in peace,
also
Kidney Moth. It did not make it in.
yeah. Sorry about that, guys. Um, that's just me failing to click the right buttons because I'm apparently not very good at doing that or remembering to do the right button clicking sometimes. Kidney Moth is blue, Tainted Vitae is green, and Juvenile Vainling is black for what it's worth. I mostly just did that because I found it really aesthetically pleasing to have those French vanillas that are all achievable in black be different colors on the back face. Um, and yeah, I like the idea of uh, like just like your opponent not knowing if you're like trying to chump attack or like you having a sack outlet and so your opponent's being afraid of like 3 different things that could come and be blocking or your opponent being worried about like, well, okay, I know that they have this 4/2 right now, but I don't have enough blockers to deal with this menace. I'm not positive how it would play out as far as things go, and it's a little bit persisty, where it's like all these bodies are on their face in some way a little bit worse than a 4/2 on the back half. So you are kind of downgrading a creature, and I know that can be slightly unexciting for some folks. Um, but I think I like where this is at just as a proof of concept for the idea of the mechanic.
Yeah, I think my main thing would be like this is the rare custom mechanic which plays a lot better in paper than it does digitally, because like digitally on stuff like cockatrice, like you have to have the flip side associated with it. Um, like in plane sculptors, you would probably just have some way to like you'd have to like manually weight it so that you have like equal probability, like you have like a bloated number of commons, but then you have equal probability of like getting any one of the Sallow henches, so that would take some setup. And then like in cockatrice there would be extra setup I don't even think it would work in cockatrice, just straight up you'd have to like have some sort of marking system outside. But in paper you just like you just like draft it, you put a sleeve in it, and that's it. And then when it dies, you just flip it over.
There's a
So
slight trickiness in paper where like people will see the back halves of things, so that's a little bit tricky.
they'll see the back halves of things, meaning?
Meaning, okay, so when you draft stuff in paper, you open a pack and people can see the back halves of double faced cards. When you pick a card that's double faced, it goes into your draft picks face down, so the back half of it's visible. So your opponent can see that you
Ooh,
have
okay.
drafted.
Okay. So you would want like you would also want like what do you call it? Cube style. You would want to have all the cards you're drafting be pre-sleeved. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. That's tricky. Um,
It's tricky but not insurmountable.
it's also one of those things where it's like a super marginal edge. Like I guess like the crosspod player from you, if you were doing crosspod pairings, would want to see the stuff that you were drafting as far as double face things go. Um, there's also, and this is getting it to the point of like it would probably be too extreme, but you could in theory have if creatures are dying into the same sort of back half thing, rather than having like multiple 1/1 death touchers, you just have like all of these different things potentially die into tainted vitae on the back half. It gets a little bit into that weird like, okay, I've got these split cards that like have kind of a name jamboree happening between them. So that might be a little problematic if you had any sort of deck registration stuff, but I don't know. I kind of shrug at that because I don't think these are ever going to like hit a state where they would be involved in anything deck registration wise. I'd much rather like explore the concept and see how much like fun it is conceptually than worry about that hurdle right now.
Yeah, fair play. Um, but yeah, I think that this is one of those things where like I kind of wish there was a set in development with it right now, because I think that it's one of those things where like the concept is cool, but I think the final form of it will shine through in development, essentially. But yeah, other than that, that's our final card of today's show. So once again, if you want to find the designer credits for all of the cards we talked about today, the full files that we pulled all of these cards from, and instructions on how you can submit your own cards to get into those files so you can potentially be submitted on future days, all of that is in the description. Thanks to Mark for joining me. As we mentioned earlier in the show, thanks to Cajun for setting up LackeyBot to MSC conversion. And thanks to Ancestral for setting up MTG.design as the second source that we get all of our collected cards from. But yeah, uh, other than that, I guess, oh yeah, other thing I'm doing is if you are someone who is making a consistent project across all of Moxtober, like you have a set you're making across all of the days, and you'd be willing to come on the show after Moxtober is over to show those off, hit me up. I'd love to feature some of the really cool projects that people have been making uh, across these days. Um, but yeah, uh, other than that, thanks everyone for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.